welcome back to CKUT 90.3 FM. This is All Things McGill. I'm Maya,
And I'm Annika.
and we are going to be interviewing Sophie. So, hi, Sophie. How are you doing? Can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you study, and yeah.
Hi, my name is Sophie. I'm from Toronto. I'm a fifth year at McGill. I study art history and Indigenous studies, and I work at a permanent housing facility for people who experience mental illness and have formerly experienced homelessness. And I also am the founder and director of Meals from Milton Parc, which is a community organization to support our unhoused neighbors in Milton Parc.
Great. So the work that you do for Meals from Milton Parc is really just absolutely incredible. And obviously, I mean, it's sort of exploded in terms of like the McGill community and the awareness around it in the Milton Parc area. So we're just wondering if you could describe for us sort of what your mandate is for Meals from Milton Parc and what you feel like your role in particular and your organization's role are on campus and the community and like how it all came to be that way.
Yeah. So it obviously started with like a focus on food security. So I was in a Indigenous food security class, and I felt really compelled to do something about the lack of food security in our neighborhood for our unhoused neighbors. Specifically because the open door, the shelter in the area used to be closed after 5:30 and on the weekends. So there was a really big gap for when people could receive food, which is what I wanted to fill with this organization. And it's kind of expanded a lot since then, just because there's been so many twists and turns with the COVID pandemic and how that's affected Indigenous peoples and unhoused peoples and people experiencing poverty. Just it's just kind of really shown the discrepancies between how people in our neighborhood were living. So it was kind of difficult because a lot of work had to be done online with the pandemic, and it was really hard to kind of find community during the pandemic and to feel like you're part of something or you're connected to your neighbors. So this was a really good way, I think, for people to kind of realize the impact they can have on others and how they can come together to support people they may not even know, just because even though like you live in the same neighborhood doesn't mean you know every person who lives there. So I think it was a really good way for people to kind of work towards something that was benefiting people who needed help the most.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the pandemic, how did you engage with the local community? And, like, do you have any suggestions for McGill students who want to engage? I know that now Montreal's opening up a bit, so there might be more options. But yeah.
Yeah, so with the pandemic, we were always following all the COVID protocols for volunteers in terms of reducing their interactions, especially during the second wave. That was super scary. And in December, most of the unhoused population got COVID. So that was also a really big kind of issue we had to deal with. And but we basically just maintained social distancing outside and everyone was wearing masks. So there wasn't really ever a COVID risk. There was one issue once when our volunteers went into a shelter that later closed down for a outbreak, and they got tested and everyone was fine. But we just made sure to be on top of everything, to ensure everyone's safety, the volunteers and the people we are there to support. And yeah, so I think that there's going to be a lot more kind of going on this year just because organizations are going to be able to have volunteers again, because it was a really hard time for like bigger organizations to have people helping them out just because of the liabilities of having volunteers with their residents and things like that. Like my work right now hasn't had a volunteer in our building in like a year and a half just because it's too much of a liability to have the chance to give someone COVID or to spread it amongst their community if they're not living in the same residence. But I think there's going to be a lot going on in terms of open doors and I need support. Um, there's a new program going to be starting soon at Milton Park with the Native Friendship Center. So I think that's going to be a great place to volunteer as well. And obviously Meals from Milton Park, if people want to come, like we're going to be doing our volunteer applications in September, or sorry, in August for September. And yeah, one really good thing about Meals from Milton Park as well is that we're connected with a lot of other organizations. So whenever someone needs volunteers, it's really easy for our volunteers to apply to them because if you volunteer with us before, you've had to go through the training process and you've had to do all the prep work to be a volunteer. So you're known to be reliable and trustworthy. So people often will ask us for volunteers and we'll give references to anyone who needs them. So we're a pretty good hub for finding and like outsourcing volunteers to other organizations that need support as well.
That's great. That's a really good initiative as well, just in terms of getting people at McGill involved, because this was my experience in particular, but I always found that even though McGill is situated right in the heart of downtown and a lot of McGill students call Milton Park that community their home, there isn't a lot of engagement between McGill students in the area and other people, including unhoused populations who live in the area. And so I guess a question I have for you is, did you find there was a long legacy of community work between McGill students in the Milton Park area, or do you feel like this was a relationship that you had to build up yourself with your organization from scratch?
It's pretty interesting because Milton Park has a huge legacy of like organizing because Milton Park is actually one of the biggest co-op housing complexes in North America. Around where we live is it's the most like highly dense co-ops in one neighborhood. So in the 70s, there was a huge organizing campaign to be able for the community to own a lot of the housing and the businesses in the area. So it's kind of a weird in between where there's a lot of people who are living in co-op housing. So their housing is, I think, 25% of their income. And then there's also McGill students who are paying usually a lot for their housing. So we live in a very interesting neighborhood where there's just very diverse lived experiences. So in terms of the unhoused population, the open door only came in 2018. So that's when a large influx of unhoused people came to a neighborhood from Atwater area. But of course, before there were people who were living unhoused here as well. There's people who've been living in Milton Park for over 20 years. So I think there was some relationship between students and unhoused population, obviously, because people have been living here. But I think this was a really good initiative just in terms of kind of connecting people on like the person to person level and giving people like tools to do it themselves as well. Because a lot of Milton Park, like Meals from Milton Park, is that like I want people to kind of do it on their own as well and to give them ideas for how they can implement this in other cities and other places. So I like to use like the educational aspect as well of like our social media accounts because I don't want it just to be people who volunteer have an impact. I want like everyone who can read like our posts or watch the interviews I've done or things like that have access to be better neighbors and to be better community members and to support people as they want to be supported and have conversations with people and to not be afraid of people they don't know or people that may look or live differently than they do just because they have these preconceived ideas of how we treat people living unhoused or people who use drugs, which I want to work on changing just because it's very interesting just between like the cultures of alcohol at McGill and then the difference between the culture of alcohol in unhoused communities. And we are totally completely fine with one of them, but one of them we see as being lesser than or dangerous when, as students, the cultures are often very similar, but one is done behind closed doors and one's done in the street because there are no closed doors to hide behind.
And along those same lines, so obviously it's really important to like maintain solidarity and also like create this community with the rest of our neighbors in Milton Park, not just students.
Mhm.
So what would be some continuing tips that you'd share on how to be more respectful and mindful of our community in the Milton Park area?
Yeah, so that's also kind of the thing that's like interesting too as well, because when we started Meals from Milton Park, it was mostly only to support our unhoused neighbors, but we've done other things as well to support our neighbors who may be experiencing food insecurity or poverty but have housing security. So we've been donating to um, the Milton Park Food Bank and getting involved with the Citizens Committee of Milton Park to support them as we can with like our donations that we aren't able to use for our outreach on the streets. But I think that's one thing that has to be kind of reconsidered as well, just because a lot of students, and I know I've done this as well, like we kind of see Milton Park as kind of being our playground, and we treat it like it's our own and no one else lives here. But there is a population of people, especially older people. There's multiple senior residences in our neighborhood and families and things like that. So I think it's like Meals Milton Park is even more so just like learning about how to be good neighbors to everyone. And I think it's important to also reflect on how we aren't the only like age group living in this area. So like things like what happened at Jean Mons in the spring is dangerous for the elderly population if the people are going to Metro afterwards. And if people are partying in the streets all night, it's not the most respectful thing to do to our neighbors and causing like damage with alcohol bottles and things like that. It's just kind of noticing how we all fit into a community, whether that be housed or unhoused, and taking responsibility for the actions we do and how that affects the rest of the community, because we're not the only ones living here.
Are you able to clarify just what you mean by what happened in Jean Mons in the spring?
Well, just once the weather got nicer, there was often like mosh pits in Jean Mons, which were often unmasked. So it was like definitely a way people could spread COVID. And there was another COVID outbreak early in the spring after the one that happened in September, where a lot of students got COVID. So it was definitely related to how often and how close people were seeing each other, even in public areas. But when people make decisions that they feel comfortable themselves doing, they aren't thinking about how their actions are going to affect others, in terms of when we were living in a red zone. And if you're coming into contact with a lot of people, you have the ability to spread COVID easier. So it's kind of just like a lot of students are living in their own bubble, but that's not really how it works when you live in a downtown area, because this isn't just a student area, even if we want to think it is.
Yeah. And we touched on this briefly so far, but just in terms of the pandemic, I'm not sure like how much experience you've had outside of uh, Meals from Milton Park. I'm sure there's a lot, but how would you say that you're coordinating grassroots and community organization attempts during a pandemic? How is that different from what it's like outside of a pandemic? What things were changed? What things were like better, worse, etc.
I think the pandemic gave people a lot of time to be able to just like really consider things they cared about and things they wanted to be more involved in, which was really beneficial to organizations that were looking to seek more support. So in terms of our organization, it was easier to access like Zoom meetings and things like that than to actually go somewhere. So it gave an upper hand in terms of people kind of getting into it. But it was harder to get people to actually show up sometimes because they had to put themselves at risk by taking the metro or by possibly coming in interaction with someone who may have also interacted with someone who may have COVID. So I think there were a lot of benefits to organizing that happened online. because of the pandemic, but it definitely was like it's a whole new world in terms of organizing now, the amount of organizing that happens online. Um, because people often like it's very hush hush how organizing and community action helps, or sorry, actually like goes down. So when it has to be put online, like there has to be like certain ways to do it that's more private. But I think the online aspect really helped people kind of dip their toes into activism and getting involved in their areas and things like that. But I personally wasn't really involved in that much activism besides like the Women's March and things like that before this. So this really kind of opened my eyes to the amount of activism that's going on behind closed doors that you like may never have seen if you like don't know someone or whatever. But there's a lot going on, and it's really kind of empowering just to see like so many people want a different future, which is really cool. But I think what's good about Milton Parc or Meals from Milton Parc as well is that we have made a lot of connections as well. So if we want to kind of share resources, we have a really good platform on our social medias to share those resources. So people who are interested in supporting unhoused neighbors may also be interested in supporting Indigenous organizations or organizations working for climate justice or things like that, or like radical organizing in terms of employment. But there's kind of a really good web of people that we've created. It's really connected us to a whole kind of group of people we didn't know before we started this.
That's great. It's nice to know that there can be, some sort of community and connectivity between people even during this time of like isolation. And so I think that's really cool.
Mhm.
So can you tell us about any upcoming events or campaigns you have coming up?
Mhm. So right now we're working on, we're still doing our meal sharing, and we're doing our Solidarity Sundays where we redistribute funds to local Indigenous peoples in need of financial support. But we're working on a few new things for the new year. We're hoping to do accompaniments to legal matters. So we're going to be matching prospective law students, and we're going to be working with people to kind of have a support system for when they go to do legal meetings and things like that. Because one of the issues is that people aren't showing up to their meetings, which can resolve their situations, but because they don't go, it becomes a warrant and then it becomes an arrest. So it's kind of just meeting the need that's happening right now. But we're also hoping to collaborate with the Native Friendship Center because they're starting in their new patrol of Milton Parc to do outreach and support. So we're going to partner with them as much as they need it from us. So in terms of whether it be meals or organizing like hygiene items or clothing, we're just trying to kind of connect the dots between where other organizations need support, but they don't really have like the capacity to seek out all of the different like odds and ends that they need. But because students often have a lot of time on their hands, they have time to kind of connect those dots. It's kind of an open call to whatever orgs need our help. We're going to support and share and meet them as we can in terms of supporting them for what they need. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, especially now that we can see people and it's going to be possible to have outdoor events. I'd really like it if we could do more like fundraising by having events and things like that and showcasing different aspects of our neighborhood. But we also are hoping to be more involved with the food bank at the Lutheran Church in Milton Parc. So there's lots of different things going on, but we're still going to be having our interviews and things like that for our leadership volunteer positions in August. So once we have all of our leadership volunteers chosen and all worked out, I'm sure they'll have lots of ideas as well to implement next year.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really inspiring. Just I think for us as also McGill students to see that the community can come together and kind of support people in our neighborhood who need our support, who've asked for our support. And so just on that note, we're coming toward the end of the interview now, and I'm wondering if you could maybe give some last, advice on the matter, or if any listeners or viewers are wanting to get involved with Meals from Milton Park, where they should go, what they should do, and just some lasting words as to wrap up the interview.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so Meals from Milton Park will be organizing our volunteer applications and our leadership volunteer applications in August for September. And it's a really good way to kind of get involved and get your toes wet in terms of organizing and activism in terms of a community setting. We do a lot of work with other organizations as well. So we're really happy to outsource volunteers to other areas if people want to get involved in other orgs but need kind of a reference or need support to find their place in community organizing. It's a great first step to start with us, and then we can help you find other places you fit the need or description of for their volunteers. But I think one of the really important things that we need to kind of just keep in mind is that we're really not that far off from being people who don't have housing security or don't have food security. And we need to keep in mind that we're much more similar than we are different. And at the end of the day, we live in the same neighborhood. We probably like a lot of the same things, and we're experiencing often the same things as well. But we see like a very large divide between housed neighbors and unhoused neighbors, which could be erased if people just knew each other better. So like my suggestion is often to just tell people to say hi to people and to not ignore them when they try to start a conversation. Because like if the worst thing you have to do today is have a 20-minute conversation with someone who that conversation is going to mean much more to them and it's going to stay with them for a lot longer, it's not the end of the world. And it's really important just to know that like the conversations we have with people who are in tough situations mean so much to them. And like the $5 you might spend on getting them a pop or a snack, if that's what they ask from you, could mean like the make or break of their day. So I think it's just really important to see like we are all very, very similar, and we would all probably get along if we were the same age or we're living in the same situation. So I just really want people to be more connected to everyone in our neighborhood. And that kind of starts with just having the conversations and just going out of your way to smile at someone or to wave at someone, and like recognizing that they have experiences we'll never understand. And it's really the least we could do is to be a good neighbor to someone who is living a life that we may never experience or understand ourselves. But yeah, I think it's been a really cool year to kind of see how things can change and how people can kind of change their ways, and how people can change the preconceived ideas they have in their brain. But we still have a lot of work to do, and we still have to keep working and supporting and listening. And I think that there's a lot more good to come, especially with our organization and Milton Parc as a community, but we're not done yet. And hopefully we have some more volunteers coming this year with new ideas and new ways to see things. But I'm really excited. I'm really thankful for everything that's happened this year. And yeah, I think it's been a great, the best of what we could have made that COVID year, but it is what it is. And now we're just looking to the future.
Great. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful talk with you. This is CKUT 90.3 FM, All Things McGill. I'm Maya.
I'm Annika.
I'm
And
so
you're and have a great day. And please check out Meals for Milton Parc.
so you can check us out on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and on our website. It's Meals for Milton Parc, and Park is with a C.